Okay, let's talk about bilingualism. Okay. Of course, you've done some studies and research on your own about the benefit of bilingualism on the human brain. So what is it about bilingualism that is good for us humans?
Yeah, being able to speak a second language, being able to switch from one language to another is a special extra flexibility in the brain that monolingual speakers don't have and can't imagine. If you could see with only one eye all your life, you could never imagine what extra dimension of sight you would have by seeing with both eyes. But when we see with both eyes, we actually see a third dimension. Very, very well and with very great meaning, we understand a third dimension. And I think being bilingual gives you something very much like that binocular vision. It gives you a slightly different take on the same world, which gives you enough additional insight into what's going on that you are more intelligent, you are more creative, and you're funnier. Bilingual people seem to have that
Better sense of humor.
Well, an extra objectivity, an extra angle of insight into what's going on in the world, and it's very difficult to persuade some Japanese people about the benefits of bilingualism.
That was my next question. Yeah, how do you?
Well, the reason for that is that there was some very bad research in 1923. There was an English researcher, D.J. Sayer, who investigated people who were students who were bilingual in English and Welsh, and he gave them IQ tests, and he reported in an article in a learned journal that the bilingual children had lower IQs than the monolingual children, and that therefore bilingualism is bad for the brain. Now this was exactly what Sayer wanted to find, and it's exactly what a lot of people want to find, and people in Japan find that conclusion congenial. The problem with Sayer's study was that it was fatally flawed. It was just wrong, but that problem wasn't pointed out until 40 years later. So for 40 years, from 1923 to 1963, everybody in the world thought that the best research shows that bilingualism hurts your brain. And so now we have learned Todai professors saying the same thing, and a lot of Japanese people firmly believe that. But Sayer made the elementary mistake of giving the children IQ tests in English only. So here are these the children whose primary language is Welsh, taking an IQ test in English and coming out with lower scores. So Sayer said, hey, it hurts their IQ. Well, nothing like it. If he had administered IQ tests, as any reasonable researcher would, in both languages, ask the student, what is your stronger language, and given an IQ test, then he wouldn't have come up with that erroneous result. But a lot of people, kind of racists in Great Britain, and maybe people who have limited tolerance for foreign cultures in Japan, welcomed the so-called scientific evidence that bilingualism hurts your brain, and they chose to believe that, and they do believe that. And the opposite is true. Now, all the research that has been done since then shows that bilingual kids have, if anything, an advantage in terms of IQ. The Kato Gakuen immersion program was surprised. I mean, they just didn't expect that. They were measuring the IQ of kids in the immersion program, and they had a non-immersion program alongside the immersion program. And the IQ scores for the immersion kids began to inch up a
little higher.
And so the question is this real? And then when they did the research and found, compared to other immersion programs in other parts of the world, yes, that's a recognized effect. If you want to improve the IQ of your kid, make him bilingual.
Yeah. But
that's
still,
an amazingly important conclusion for parents, I think.
Yeah.
We have some returning students in high school, but they can speak English and Japanese, but they can write English and Japanese perfectly. So they feel that is negative point for them.
Yes, yeah.
And then they don't have native language, I think.
They're not confident.
Education in reading and writing is kind of special, and rather recent in human existence on Earth.
Yeah.
People have been reading and writing only for less than 5,000 years, and the human being is designed to speak languages, maybe to speak many languages. And reading, writing is just a matter of training. So if these returnees need more training, okay, they need more training. And if they want to be able to write or to read at a high level, they're perfectly capable of learning to do that.
But they will have to separate, make new classes for returnees only.
Yeah. So that would be a very good idea, because here are these people who speak pera, but their writing skill hasn't caught up with their grade level, so they need to be encouraged to write and to read, because it turns out that the only way to learn to be a good writer is to read a lot. have sequences of words flowing around in your head when you're trying to write. That comes from reading. So just more experience, it'd be okay.
Let me go back to previous questions I asked. I got this article from your friend,
Torigai Kumiko.
Torikai Kumiko.
Oh, yes, yes,
An
yes.
acquaintance of hers. And
Oh, you know her. Oh, that's interesting.
the question was put to her: are Americans and British to be the ultimate judges of what can be considered acceptable English and what cannot? And she answered, no. The studies being conducted in Europe, as I mentioned earlier, include collecting diverse samples of English being spoken by non-English speakers and checking their intelligibility to other nationals. If nobody can understand what is being said, then steps will have to be taken to ensure that nobody else will learn to speak in the same manner. So what do you think about her?
I think that's exactly right. It's a criminal offense to try to hold Japanese people up to the standards of native speaker English, either American English or British English, because